War films usually promise victory. These don't. What if the real story isn't who wins, but what survives inside those who don't break? Every film on this list exposes something deeper. Fear that lingers, choices that haunt, and lives that never return to what they were. Stay with this, because by the end, you won't just remember these stories, you'll carry them.
Black Hawk Down, 2001. War does not always unfold with strategy or glory. Sometimes it collapses into confusion within minutes. Black Hawk Down captures that collapse with terrifying precision. Set during the Battle of Mogadishu, the film throws you into a mission that was supposed to last under an hour, yet spirals into a nightmare that consumes an entire city. What makes this story so unsettling is how quickly control vanishes. Ye soldiers who entered with confidence suddenly find themselves surrounded, cut off, and hunted in unfamiliar streets. The film refuses to romanticize heroism. Instead, it shows exhaustion, fear, and the desperate instinct to survive another minute. Every explosion feels immediate, every loss feels personal. There is no single protagonist guiding you through the chaos. Instead, the narrative fragments just like the battlefield itself. You witness multiple perspectives, each one trapped in its own struggle. By the time silence finally arrives, it does not feel like victory. It feels like survival barely earned. And that is what makes this film linger. It reminds you that modern war is not planned perfection. It is unpredictable, brutal, and merciless. The Thin Red Line, 1998. War is often told through bullets and blood. The Thin Red Line chooses a different path. It asks a quieter, more unsettling question. What happens inside the human mind when it is forced into violence? Set during the Battle of Guadalcanal, the film drifts between soldiers who are less concerned with victory and more consumed by their own thoughts. Fear does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. You hear it in their reflections about life-death and the fragile line between them. The battlefield becomes a place where nature continues its beauty even as men destroy each other within it. The contrast is haunting. Tall grass moves gently while gunfire tears through it. Birds sing while soldiers fall. The film suggests that war is not just destruction of bodies. It is a rupture in the human soul. There are moments where action erupts suddenly. Yet even those moments feel distant, as if the characters are observing their own fate from somewhere outside themselves. This creates an emotional detachment that is more disturbing than any explosion. By the end, you are left with a feeling rather than a conclusion. War here is not explained. It is experienced as a quiet tragedy. Hacksaw Ridge, 2016. Courage is usually defined by the willingness to fight. Hacksaw Ridge challenges that idea completely. It tells the true story of Desmond Doss, a soldier who refused to carry a weapon, yet walked straight into one of the deadliest battles of World War II. At first, his conviction feels impossible. Surrounded by men trained to kill, he chooses to heal. This creates tension long before the battle even begins. He is mocked, doubted, and nearly rejected. Yet when the chaos of Okinawa erupts, everything changes. The battlefield becomes a place where belief is tested in the most brutal way imaginable. The film does not hold back in showing the horror. Bodies fall, screams echo, and the ground itself seems alive with violence. Yet in the middle of this destruction, one man moves against the current. Instead of taking lives, he risks his own to save them. Again and again, he returns into danger, pulling wounded soldiers back from certain death. Each rescue feels like a small miracle, not because it is easy, but because it seems impossible. The contrast between brutality and compassion creates an emotional impact that builds with every moment. By the end, courage is redefined. It is no longer about strength in combat. It is about standing firm in humanity when everything around you demands otherwise. Platoon, 1986. Some war films show conflict between armies. Platoon reveals a deeper fracture. The war within the soldiers themselves. Directed by Oliver Stone, who lived through Vietnam, the film carries a sense of authenticity that feels almost too real. The story follows a young recruit who enters the jungle expecting purpose and direction. What he finds instead is division. Two sergeants represent opposing forces. One driven by survival at any cost, the other clinging to morality in a place that punishes it. The soldiers are caught between these extremes, unsure of who they are becoming. The jungle is not just a setting, it is a presence. Thick, suffocating, and unforgiving. Visibility is limited, and danger feels constant. This environment amplifies paranoia, turning men against each other, even before the enemy appears. Trust becomes fragile. Fear becomes dominant. Moments of violence erupt suddenly and without warning. Yet the most painful scenes are not always the battles. They are the quiet realizations that innocence has been lost, that the person who entered the war is no longer the same. By the end, there is no clear victory, only survival and reflection. The film leaves you with a haunting truth. Sometimes the greatest damage of war is not what it destroys outside. It is what it erases within. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. History is often told by the victors. Letters from Iwo Jima dares to shift that perspective and reveal the war through the eyes of those who were destined to lose. Set. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, the film follows Japanese soldiers who are preparing for an invasion they know they cannot survive. What makes this story devastating is its humanity. These are not faceless enemies. They are fathers, sons, and friends holding on to fragments of their lives through letters written home. Those letters become emotional anchors in a world that is collapsing. Each word carries longing, regret, and quiet acceptance. The battlefield itself feels suffocating. Soldiers hide within tunnels, buried beneath the island, turning the war into a slow and inevitable descent. There is no illusion of rescue, only the question of how long they can endure. The tension builds not from sudden action, but from the knowledge that the end is approaching. Moments of connection appear unexpectedly. A shared conversation. A memory spoken aloud. These brief glimpses of humanity make the loss feel even heavier when it arrives. By the time silence takes over, the film leaves a profound impact. It forces you to confront a truth rarely shown. That every side of war carries stories of courage, fear, and heartbreaking sacrifice. Dunkirk, 2017. Survival is not always loud. Sometimes it is measured in seconds. Dunkirk transforms a historical evacuation into a relentless experience where time itself becomes the enemy. Directed by Christopher Nolan, the film abandons traditional storytelling and instead immerses you in three timelines unfolding simultaneously. On land, soldiers wait on a beach exposed and vulnerable. In the air, pilots fight a silent battle above the clouds where every decision carries immediate consequences. At sea, civilians sail toward danger, driven by a quiet sense of duty. These perspectives collide, creating a tension that never releases its grip. What makes this film unique is its minimal dialogue. Characters are not defined by backstory, but by action. You do not learn who they were before the war. You only witness what they are willing to do to survive it. This creates a universal connection. Anyone could be standing in their place. Sound plays a critical role. The ticking of time builds anxiety long before anything happens. When danger arrives, it feels sudden and overwhelming. Ships sink, planes fall, and the horizon offers no safety. Yet within this chaos, small acts of bravery emerge. A hand reaching out. A boat turning back. These moments become the emotional core. By the end, survival itself feels like 1917, 2019. War often feels distant when told through traditional storytelling. 1917 removes that distance completely. It unfolds as if captured in a single unbroken moment, placing you beside two soldiers tasked with delivering a message that could save hundreds of lives. From the very beginning, there is no escape. The camera moves forward and you move with it. Trenches stretch endlessly. Mud clings to every step. The world feels heavy and immediate. There is no pause to reflect, only the urgency to keep going. What makes this journey so intense is its simplicity. There is no grand strategy, no complex mission, just a race against time. Yet that simplicity amplifies every obstacle. A collapsed trench becomes a life-threatening barrier. A quiet field hides unseen danger. Even moments of silence feel loaded with tension. As the soldiers move deeper into enemy territory, the environment transforms. Day shifts into night. Light becomes shadow. The world grows more surreal as exhaustion sets in. Reality begins to blur, and survival becomes instinct rather than thought. The emotional weight builds gradually. You begin to understand what is at stake not through speeches, but through small details. A photograph, a memory, a promise. By the time the journey reaches its end, the impact is overwhelming. The film does not just show war. It makes you feel every step of it. The Deer Hunter, 1978. Some wars never truly end. The Deer Hunter explores what happens when soldiers return home but leave parts of themselves behind. The film begins far from the battlefield, in a quiet town where life feels stable and predictable. Friendships are strong. The future seems certain. This sense of normalcy is essential. It gives weight to everything that follows. When the characters are sent to Vietnam, the shift is not immediate. It is gradual and unsettling. The world they knew begins to fade, replaced by an environment defined by fear and unpredictability. The most haunting aspect of the film is how it captures trauma, not as a single event, but as something that lingers. A game that once symbolized control becomes a symbol of helplessness. Moments repeat in memory long after they have passed. The line between past and present begins to blur. When the soldiers return home, the war does not stay behind. It follows them into everyday life. Simple interactions feel strained. Silence replaces conversation. The people they once were no longer exist in the same way. This creates a quiet tragedy that unfolds without explosions or gunfire. Friendships are tested. Identities shift. The question becomes not whether they survived, but what survival has cost them. By the end, the film delivers a powerful realization. War does not only take lives, it changes the meaning of living itself. Das Boot, 1981. War is often imagined as open battlefields and visible enemies. Das Boot takes you somewhere far more suffocating. Deep beneath the ocean inside a German submarine where escape is impossible, and fear becomes constant. From the moment the vessel submerges, the world changes. Space is limited. Air feels heavy, and every sound carries meaning. The crew moves through narrow corridors surrounded by steel that both protects and traps them. Outside lies an unseen threat. Enemy ships circle above, waiting for any sign of movement. What makes this film so intense is its patience. There are long stretches where nothing happens, yet tension continues to build. Every creak of the hull suggests pressure. Every silence feels like a warning. The men wait, knowing that danger can arrive without notice. When attacks begin, the experience becomes overwhelming. Depth charges explode nearby, shaking the submarine violently. Lights flicker, systems fail, and panic spreads. The crew can do nothing but endure, hoping the structure holds together. Survival depends on discipline and trust under extreme pressure. Yet beyond the physical danger, there is a deeper emotional weight. These are young men caught in a war they do not control. Their expressions reveal exhaustion, fear, and longing for a life beyond the ocean. By the end, the film leaves you with a lasting impression. War is not always about confrontation. Sometimes it is about enduring the unbearable in complete isolation. Come and See, 1985. There are war films that depict violence. Come and See forces you to witness its psychological destruction. Set during the Nazi occupation of Belarus, the story follows a young boy whose excitement about joining resistance quickly dissolves into unimaginable horror. At the beginning, there is a sense of curiosity. The boy sees war as an adventure. This illusion fades almost immediately. The world around him begins to collapse in ways he cannot comprehend. Our villages are destroyed. Families disappear, and the line between safety and danger vanishes completely. What makes this film so disturbing is its perspective. You experience events through the eyes of someone who is still trying to understand them. His confusion becomes your confusion. His fear becomes your fear. The camera often lingers on his face, capturing a transformation that feels painfully real. Innocence is not lost in a single moment. It is eroded piece by piece. Sound design plays a crucial role. At times, it fades into a ringing silence as if the mind itself is shutting down. This creates an unsettling sense of detachment, making the violence feel even more overwhelming. Reality becomes fragmented, mirroring the psychological state of the character. The film does not offer relief. It does not provide a clear narrative of victory or defeat. Instead, it presents war as a relentless force that consumes everything in its path. By the end, you are left with an experience rather than a story. One that is difficult to process, yet impossible to forget. This is not entertainment. It is confrontation. 2014. War can forge bonds that feel unbreakable, yet it can also expose the fragility of those connections. Fury places you inside a tank crew during the final days of World War II, where survival depends on trust and instinct. From the moment a new recruit joins the group, the tension is clear. He is inexperienced, uncertain, and unprepared for what lies ahead. The crew around him has already been shaped by war. Their faces carry the weight of what they have seen. Their actions are driven by necessity rather than emotion. The tank itself becomes a character. Confined, dark, and constantly moving, it serves as both protection and prison. Inside it, the men operate as a single unit. Every command, every reaction must be precise. Outside, chaos unfolds. Explosions tear through the landscape, and enemies appear without warning. What makes this story compelling is the contrast between brutality and loyalty. The crew is capable of harsh decisions, yet they are bound by a shared understanding. They rely on each other not just for survival, but for a sense of identity in a world that is falling apart. As the narrative builds toward its final stand, the stakes become clear. This is not about winning the war. It is about holding on to something human within it. Each decision carries weight, and every sacrifice feels earned. By the end, the film leaves a powerful impression. War may strip away comfort and certainty, but it can also reveal the depth of human connection under pressure. Apocalypse Now. 1979. War is not always defined by physical conflict. Apocalypse Now explores something far more unsettling. The gradual descent into madness. Set during the Vietnam War, the film follows a mission that feels less like a journey and more like a psychological unraveling. From the beginning, there is a sense that reality is unstable. The environment is unpredictable, shifting between moments of calm and sudden chaos. The river becomes a pathway into deeper uncertainty, where each stop reveals a new layer of disorder. Soldiers behave unpredictably, authority feels unreliable, and the rules of engagement seem to dissolve. What makes this film so powerful is its atmosphere. It does not rely on constant action. Instead, it builds tension through surreal imagery and unsettling encounters. Scenes unfold that feel almost dreamlike, yet carry an underlying sense of danger. You are never sure what will happen next or why. As the mission progresses, the line between sanity and madness becomes increasingly blurred. The objective remains clear, yet its meaning begins to change. What started as a task transforms into a confrontation with the darker aspects of human nature. By the time the journey reaches its conclusion, the experience feels overwhelming. There is no clear resolution, only a lingering sense that something fundamental has been lost. The film leaves you with a haunting realization. War does not only destroy the world around it, it reshapes the mind in ways that cannot be undone. Full Metal Jacket. 1987. War does not begin on the battlefield. Full Metal Jacket shows that it begins much earlier inside the minds of those who are trained to fight it. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, the film is divided into two distinct experiences that together form a complete transformation. The first half takes place in boot camp, where recruits are stripped of individuality. Discipline is enforced with relentless intensity. Language becomes harsh, identity is reduced to function, and emotion is treated as weakness. The environment is controlled yet suffocating. Every moment is designed to reshape the soldiers into something efficient and obedient. This psychological conditioning reaches a breaking point that feels inevitable. It reveals how fragile the human mind can be when placed under constant pressure. The cost of transformation becomes clear long before the soldiers ever see combat. When the film shifts to Vietnam, the chaos becomes external. The structure of training gives way to unpredictability. Streets replace barracks, and danger appears without warning. Yet the psychological impact of training remains. The soldiers carry it with them, influencing how they react and how they perceive the world around them. What makes this film powerful is its dual perspective. It does not just show war. It shows how war is created within people before it is unleashed outside. By the end, the question is no longer about survival. It is about what remains of humanity after transformation. Grave of the Fireflies. 1988. War stories often focus on soldiers. Grave of the Fireflies chooses a far more heartbreaking perspective. It follows two children struggling to survive in Japan during the final days of World War II. At first, there is a fragile sense of hope. The siblings believe they can endure the chaos around them. They find small moments of comfort in simple things. A shared meal. A quiet place to rest. These moments feel precious because they are temporary. As the story unfolds, reality becomes impossible to ignore. Resources disappear, safety vanishes, and the world grows increasingly indifferent to their suffering. The children are forced to navigate a situation they cannot fully understand. Their innocence makes the experience even more painful because they continue to hope even when hope no longer makes sense. The film uses animation not to soften the impact, but to deepen it. The contrast between gentle visuals and harsh reality creates a powerful emotional response. You are drawn into their world only to witness it slowly fall apart. What makes this story unforgettable is its simplicity. There are no large battles or dramatic confrontations. The tragedy lies in everyday survival. Hunger, loneliness, and loss become the central conflicts. By the end, the emotional weight is overwhelming. The film delivers a quiet yet devastating truth. War does not only destroy armies, it destroys lives that never had a chance to fight back. The Pianist. 2002. Survival in war is not always about fighting. The Pianist presents a different kind of endurance, one defined by silence, patience, and the constant fear of being discovered. The story follows a musician trying to survive during the Holocaust as his world is gradually stripped away. At the beginning, life still holds structure. There is routine, purpose, and identity. These elements begin to disappear one by one as the environment becomes increasingly hostile. The character is forced to adapt not through strength, but through restraint. Every movement must be calculated, every sound must be controlled. What makes this film so powerful is its use of isolation. The protagonist spends long periods alone, hidden within ruins. Time feels stretched and uncertain. Days blend together, and the outside world becomes something distant yet threatening. This creates a sense of vulnerability that is constant and unrelenting. Moments of humanity appear unexpectedly. A gesture of kindness, a shared understanding. These moments stand out because they are rare. They remind you that even in the darkest circumstances, compassion can still exist. The film avoids dramatizing survival. Instead, it presents it as a series of small decisions, each one carrying life or death consequences. This approach makes the experience feel authentic and deeply personal. By the end, survival itself becomes a quiet triumph. Not loud, not celebrated, but profoundly meaningful. Paths of Glory, 1957. War is often justified through ideas of honor and duty. Paths of Glory exposes how those ideas can be manipulated by those in power. Set during World War I, the film focuses not on the enemy across the battlefield, but on the leadership within. The story begins with an impossible order. Soldiers are commanded to attack a position that cannot be taken. The decision is driven not by strategy, but by ambition. When the attack fails, the blame does not fall on those who made the decision. Instead, it is placed on the soldiers who carried it out. This creates a conflict that feels deeply unjust. Men who have already risked everything are now forced to defend themselves against accusations that ignore reality. The courtroom scenes become as intense as any battle. Words replace weapons, yet the consequences remain just as severe. What makes this film so powerful is its clarity. It does not rely on spectacle. It relies on truth. The injustice is presented in a way that is impossible to ignore. You see how systems can fail, how authority can be abused, and how individuals can be sacrificed for reputation. The emotional impact builds quietly. There are no dramatic twists, only a steady realization of what is happening. This makes the final moments feel inevitable, yet still devastating. By the end, the film leaves a lasting question. In war, who truly pays the price for decisions made far from the battlefield? Saving Private Ryan, 1998. War cinema changed forever the moment Saving Private Ryan opened with its brutal depiction of the Normandy invasion. Directed by Steven Spielberg, the film does not ease you into its world. It throws you directly into chaos where survival feels uncertain from the very first second. The opening sequence alone redefined realism. Soldiers land on the beach under relentless fire with no time to think or react. The camera does not look away. It forces you to confront the confusion, fear, and randomness of combat. This is not choreographed heroism. It is raw survival where every movement carries risk. Beyond that initial shock, the story becomes something more personal. A small group of soldiers is sent on a mission to find one man and bring him home. At first, the objective feels simple, yet as the journey unfolds, its emotional complexity grows. Each member of the squad carries their own doubts, fears, and reasons for continuing. What makes this film powerful is how it balances scale with intimacy. Large battles feel overwhelming, while quiet conversations reveal the humanity beneath the uniforms. You begin to understand that each soldier represents a life beyond the battlefield. As the mission reaches its conclusion, the emotional weight becomes undeniable. Sacrifice is no longer abstract. It is personal and immediate. By the end, the film leaves a lasting impact. It asks a question that lingers long after the credits. What is the true cost of saving one life in the middle of war? Schindler's List, 1993. War is not always fought with weapons. Schindler's List reveals a different kind of battlefield. One defined by choices, morality, and the power of individual action in the face of overwhelming darkness. The film follows a businessman who initially sees opportunity in conflict. Profit becomes his motivation, and survival of others is not his concern. This perspective slowly begins to change as he witnesses the reality around him. The suffering is not distant. It is immediate and impossible to ignore. What makes this transformation so powerful is its gradual nature. There is no single moment where everything shifts. Instead, it happens through a series of realizations, each one building on the last until indifference becomes impossible. Action replaces observation, and risk becomes necessary. The film does not rely on constant dialogue to deliver its message. Visual storytelling carries much of the emotional weight. Moments of silence often say more than words could. A single image can convey the scale of loss and the depth of suffering. At its core, this is a story about humanity under extreme pressure. And it shows how one person can make a difference even when the system around them is designed to destroy. The emotional impact builds steadily, leading to a conclusion that feels both hopeful and heartbreaking. Lives are saved, yet the cost remains visible. By the end, the film delivers a powerful reminder. In the darkest moments of history, the smallest acts of courage can become the most meaningful. Life is Beautiful, 1997. Sometimes the most powerful response to horror is not resistance, but love. Life is Beautiful tells a story that blends warmth and tragedy in a way that feels almost impossible yet deeply real. The film begins with lightness. Humor defines the early moments, and life feels full of possibility. This tone creates a connection that makes what follows even more painful. When the setting shifts into the reality of a concentration camp, the contrast becomes overwhelming. What makes this story unique is the perspective of a father trying to protect his child from the truth. He transforms their situation into a game creating rules and rewards that hide the danger surrounding them. This act of imagination becomes a shield against fear. The brilliance of the film lies in how it balances these opposing elements. Humor never feels out of place because it serves a purpose. It is not there to entertain, but to preserve innocence. Each moment of laughter carries an underlying sadness because you understand what is being concealed. As the narrative progresses, the tension increases. The father must maintain the illusion even as circumstances grow more dangerous. His determination becomes a quiet form of heroism, not defined by combat, but by sacrifice. By the end, the emotional impact is profound. The story does not rely on spectacle. It relies on connection. It leaves you with a simple yet powerful realization. Even in the darkest environments, love can become an act of resistance. All Quiet on the Western Front, 2022. War often begins with excitement and belief in purpose. All Quiet on the Western Front strips those illusions away with relentless honesty. It follows young soldiers who enter World War I expecting honor only to confront a reality defined by fear and loss. From the moment they arrive at the front, the transformation begins. The environment is harsh, unforgiving, and indifferent. Trenches stretch endlessly filled with mud, exhaustion, and tension. The soldiers quickly realize that survival depends not on bravery, but on chance. What makes this film so powerful is its focus on disillusionment. The characters are not seasoned fighters. They are young and unprepared. Their expectations collapse as they experience the true nature of war. This creates an emotional journey that feels immediate and deeply personal. Combat scenes are intense, yet they are not glorified. Violence appears sudden and chaotic. There is no sense of control, only reaction. This reinforces the idea that war is unpredictable and often meaningless. Between battles, there are moments of reflection. Conversations reveal fear, regret, and a longing for a life that feels increasingly distant. These moments provide contrast, highlighting what has been lost. As the story approaches its conclusion, the sense of inevitability grows. The outcome is not defined by victory or defeat, but by the realization that nothing remains the same. By the end, the film delivers a haunting message. War does not create heroes. It creates survivors shaped by experiences they can never escape. War leaves marks that history cannot fully explain. These stories bring those marks to life in ways that stay with you long after they end. If this journey moved you, share your thoughts and stay for more powerful stories that reveal the truth behind the screen.